cab pulled in front of an apartment building. Krista checked the paper in her hand, then shifted her attention to the thick black numbers over the main entrance. It was an older building. Red paint peeled in thick patches around the doorway, while a gross black crud waged war on the brick structure. The brick had lost the battle, but the war raged on. Sites like this weren't uncommon. A modest portion of the buildings on this side of town had fallen into disrepair. That didn't bother her. As long as the address matched this grungy old apartment building, this is where Krista wanted to be. He twisted in the seat and stared back at her with curious eyes. "Do you want me to wait here?" "No, that's all right," she answered as she paid the fare. She didn't know how long she'd be and didn't have the extra money to pay a sitting fee. Krista watched the cab drive away as she stood on the curb in the twilight. She glanced to the side as a group of 3 boys rode past on their bikes. Each of them watched her as though she were an outsider lost on the wrong side of the tracks. She ignored them as she made her way to the building's front door. Adrian Nichols was the 4th name on the list. With a heavy hand, Krista pressed her thumb on the call button. It only took a second for someone to answer. "Yes," came a curious feminine voice. "Hi," Krista greeted. "Ms. Nichols, I was wondering if I could have a moment of your time." She rolled her eyes as she spoke the last word. That sounded like something a salesperson would say. Perhaps she should have prepared a speech, but Krista didn't think. "I think you've been sleeping with my husband," would have sounded better. "Who is this?" "My name is Krista, and I—" "Go away." Krista scrunched her forehead. A surge of spite coursed through her as she pressed the button a second time. The woman answered. She must have expected Krista to try again. "Do you understand English?" "Yes," Krista said, undeterred. "But I don't think you understand the nature of my visit." "I don't care about the nature of your visit. Now, go away." What was wrong with this woman? Adrian Nichols didn't know anything about her. Where did all this hate come from? Krista pressed the button a 3rd time. Adrian's voice offered the friendliness of a predatory animal. "If you don't leave my building, I will call the police." "Go ahead." Krista leaned closer to the speaker to make her point known. "Then you can explain to them why you are harboring a felon in your apartment." Krista waited through the silence. After a slight pause, Adrian's voice returned. "What are you talking about?" Krista sighed. "If you let me talk to you, I'll try to explain." "Hang on a sec." Krista stood back, her mind racing. Was she doing the right thing? Who was this woman? How did she know Christian? How long had he stayed here? When a sec turned into 5 minutes, Krista sat on the stoop. As she leaned against the railing, the 3 boys rode by again. This time, they slowed their bikes so they could stare at her a second time. The oldest looked to be about 14, while the youngest couldn't have been more than 10. "Go home, Randy," a woman's voice said from behind her. Krista stood and brushed off any loose dirt. The 3 boys took off down the street. She turned and did a double take. This was the person Christian stayed with? Adrian was older, probably in her mid-40s, with long black hair, combed straight to hang midway down her back. Her thin face had a pasty complexion. She was overcoming a cold or had been crying. She wore gray sweatpants and a plain white blouse covered by a tan knit wrap that drooped off her shoulders like an old curtain. "Ms. Nichols?" Krista asked. She held out her hand and offered the woman a forced smile. The woman nodded as she accepted the handshake. "You're Krista?" she asked, clearly surprised. "How old are you?" Krista furrowed her brow. 23. "My gracious," Adrian whispered. "Is that all?" Krista frowned, not quite sure what the woman tried to insinuate. "How do you know my name?" "David told me your name after I confronted him about the phone call. He said you were a liar." "David?" Krista held Adrian's stare, unsure how to begin. With a sigh, she decided not to waste any more time than she already had. "I don't know anyone named David. I'm looking for Christian Adams. Does he stay with you?" Adrian shifted her gaze down the street. "No, the man who lived with me was David Williams, but he doesn't live here anymore. He left when you called the other day." Krista felt a stab of anger. She was so close, and he managed to slip away. She wasn't surprised. If she were in his shoes, she would have bolted too. Being a felon meant a life on the run. Krista only wished she had been able to secure the information faster. Adrian quietly cleared her throat. "What did you mean when you said felon?" Krista pushed her frustration aside. I'll get to that in a second. Right now, I need to know if you've heard from him. No, Adrian answered sadly. Not a word. This whole trip began to feel like a waste of time. How long did he stay with you? 4 months. Krista's eyes widened. 4 months? Adrian nodded. I took your call, and when I hung up, I asked him about it. He got really defensive and started asking a bunch of questions. It seemed suspicious. I thought he used a different name to cheat on me. We had a huge fight. He left shortly after you called. Well, Krista huffed at the irony, I don't see how that's possible. She held up her left hand with the silver wedding band. Christian's my husband. Adrian frowned. His name is David. Are you sure you have the right person? Well, let's see. Krista reached into her pocket. She pulled out her phone and brought up a family photo of her, Christian, and Alexis, taken when their daughter was 2 months old, and held it out to her. Here, look at this. Is this the man who lived with you? Adrian took the phone. Her mouth opened slowly as she stared. Oh my God, she gasped. I had no idea he was married. I'm so sorry. It's not a big deal. I don't care, Krista admitted. The marriage itself was rather miserable. Still, he shouldn't run around on you, Adrian reasoned. Krista didn't care. She also didn't want to argue about it, so she shrugged. Is that your daughter? Yes. How old is she? She just turned 4. Adrian handed the phone back and crossed her arms over her chest. I had no idea. It's all right. That's not why I'm here. Krista waved off the woman's apology and tucked the phone back in her pocket. There's no easy way to say this, so I'm just going to put it out there. Christian is wanted for murder. Murder? Yes, he killed my father. Adrian put her hand over her mouth. Are you sure it was him? Krista nodded. She fought a sudden sickness as she remembered that day. Yes, he shot him 6 months ago. Oh my word, Adrian said, her voice barely above a whisper. Krista's chest tightened at the memory. The last thing she wanted to do was break down in front of a stranger. She cleared her throat. I came to warn you not to trust him if he does come back. I think you should call the police. Detective Weiss is in charge of the case. Tell him what you know. I will. Adrian touched Krista's arm. Are you looking for him by yourself? Krista took a step back. I'm just trying to help. It's dangerous for you to be. Adrian's words drifted away as Krista's phone interrupted their conversation. Krista reached into her pocket, took out her phone, and glanced at the display. She looked back at Adrian. Excuse me for a second. Adrian nodded. Krista made her way down the stairs to the sidewalk. Hello? Where are you? Came the prying voice of her mother. I'm visiting someone. Are you back from the zoo? Yes, we've been back for about 3 hours now, her mother said. I just received the strangest call from a man who said he wanted to talk to you. A man? Krista's mind instantly went back to the last conversation she had with Christian. Who? I don't know. He wouldn't give me his name. He just said that he talked to you last night and wanted to have another talk with you. Her mother paused. Do you know anything about this? Yes, I do, Krista said, somewhat relieved. Did he say where to meet him? No. Did he say when to meet him? No. He said he'd find you. Oh, Krista didn't know if she should be worried or not. Judging from last night's encounter, if Nick's friend wanted to find her, there was little she could do to stop him. She tried to feed more confidence into her voice than she felt. Okay, well, thanks for the warning. Wait, her mother said quickly. I don't like the idea of strange men calling here, telling me they are going to find you. Don't worry. I think if he wanted to kill me, he probably wouldn't have called and told you ahead of time. That's not funny, and I still don't like it. All right. Her mother would worry regardless of what Krista said to calm her nerves. I'll be careful. That wasn't good enough for Brenda. I want you to come home. Okay, I'll head that way. It was a lie. Her mother easily saw through it. You better mean it. See you soon. Krista. The warning tone came through the phone. Krista imagined the disapproving look she had come accustomed to associating with her mother. Bye, Mom. Love you. Krista quickly ended the call and looked back at Adrian Nichols, who patiently waited on the stoop. I'm sorry, I have to go. Adrian offered a stiff nod. Be careful out there. If he comes back, call the police station on 34th and ask for Detective Weiss. Krista turned and headed down the sidewalk. By the end of their conversation, the sun faded completely behind the horizon, and the orange sky was taking on a hint of purple. She walked under streetlights and tried to stay in the light as much as possible. It wouldn't be long before the artificial lights took over. She stuffed her hands in her pockets as she brooded over her day's work. Her search for Christian was no closer than this morning or the night before. Though she hadn't found where her husband currently hid, she had flushed him out. Maybe, if she was lucky, saved the woman who might have become his next victim. Her main concern centered on Nick's mysterious friend. She couldn't get him out of her mind. The way she understood it, all the business they needed to discuss had concluded the night before. His call raised a wild curiosity within her. Why had he bothered to contact her mother? Why would he leave such a disturbing message? And perhaps the most puzzling of all, why would he bother to meet with her a second time? Had he changed his mind? Krista smiled at the spark of frightening excitement. There was only one way to find out.